Welcome back to Kids Planning. I'm Allison. This is Daniel, and today we are doing something a little different.
Yep. So we do a lot of content around game schooling, around family games. We can obviously just observe, playing games, things like that. There's benefits to brain development,
Yes.
just emotional development, relational stuff like that. It's just, there's got to be benefits to it. But aside from just being fun, but we're not quite qualified to actually
Get into the science.
yes, get in the science of it. So we wanted to talk to someone who is qualified to do
Yes.
that. So we reached out to Brian MacDonald, who runs the Brains on Games channel. If you haven't seen that, we'll leave a link to that below.
Yeah.
But he is a psychologist who also does a lot of stuff, uses games in his psychologist practice with patients, and also just has a YouTube channel devoted to basically what we're talking about just games and how they work with development, the kind of different skills, kind of cognitive skills that different games work with when you're playing them. So we reached out to him to see if he would have this conversation with us, and he was happy to do that, which we're so thankful that he was.
Yeah.
So now we're going to jump over to that conversation. So this is Brian MacDonald from Brains on Games, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about just the benefits of playing games.
Yep.
So Brian, thank you so much for kind of talking with us today. So what prompted me to want to reach out to you initially was just sitting there looking at our board game collection. I just had the thought that, like, surely, I mean, our boys and us, we've gotten to the place where we can go and there's probably 20 or 30 games on our shelf that we can easily pull off.
And just play.
Yeah, just play.
Don't
very
have to
few.
open the rule book.
And if it is, it's just checking a few things. So
Yeah.
surely there's some sort of, especially with kids when their brains are squishy and still developing, some sort of benefit to not just playing games, but also playing a variety of games, kind of managing all these different rules
And
in their
mechanics.
brains. Yeah. And keeping all of those things separate and being able to access those just kind of without having to go and again reread the rules, things like that. So we just wanted to talk to you because a big part of our audience is parents with kids. So just have that conversation with you, who is much more qualified to talk about brain development, things like that. So
What have you seen while you're working with games and things like that with the brain development? What have you seen those connections be, or have you? I'm assuming you have because you use games, but just kind of wanting to see that even the science behind what games are doing to our brains.
The science is tricky, right? Because we're used to, and I can see on the shelf behind you, you're used to the more modern board games. And it's easy to find research about chess and the benefits of playing chess. It's a bit harder to find something like, what happens to kids who play Catan, for example, or one of the other more modern games that we all love to play with our kids. But sort of more broadly, there are, I think, big implications for relationships between parents and kids, which is one of the most important things for skill development to even occur. If you're concerned that the people who are supposed to be looking after you and looking out for you, if you don't feel close to them, that stress is an obstacle to all the other kinds of development that should be happening, that would be happening naturally if everything else was copacetic. So I think just, being for adults to be able to recapture that sense of play and imagination and creativity that goes along with playing games, and to do that with the kids, especially if the kids' friends come over, or if the grown up, uncle so-and-so, even though they're not really your uncle, or aunt such and such, even though they're not really related, like if you've got kids who are interacting with adult family friends in a positive way, if you've got yourself as a parent interacting with your kids' friends, that really is protective against things like depression or anxiety that would interfere with the development of other skills and abilities that should be occurring naturally.
I didn't even think about the relationship aspect, but yeah, that is, we say that games kind of helped keep us glued together in the past few years. It really did. We are very, I don't know, games have a soft spot in our hearts just because of how it's developed our family connection.
And we've gone from having a game night to the the special night of the week is the night that we don't play a game.
Yeah.
Kind of that we play so many games, and
we
it's
watch
just,
Ninja Warrior instead or something like
yeah.
that.
So I think that it's more common that we do play a game than we don't, which is just, again, we just love that dynamic in our family.
Yeah.
So if we do go to chess, because I would assume some of the same concepts, what are using the chess example, what are some of the cognitive benefits of that, or just of gaming in general?
Well, I mean, if you look at the spatial skills that are involved in chess, even the spatial memory of how the pieces move, there's logical problem solving and prediction. If I move here, what is that other person going to do? It is a real pattern recognition game as well. So, and you get the visual memory practice of, if you're really into chess and you're learning, particular opening moves and defenses against those things, like that's something that chess can really do. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I usually, instead of chess, I'll pull out a game like the Duke, or I played War Chest with my son the other day, which are both chess-like games, but there's a bag building element to War Chest, so that you don't know what pieces you're going to pull out. There's a randomness.
We've not played those. That sounds
fun. My goodness. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. War Chest is one that I really, really enjoy. And I like it. And one reason why I like it is that it's a chess-like game, but you can play with 2 teams of 2. So you can play it as a 4-player game instead of just a 1-on-1 like chess is. But yeah, I think that's a really fun game. And the Duke is similar, with tiles that move across the board and you're trying to capture the other player's Duke. But you're drawing tiles from a bag, so you don't know which pieces you're going to have at any given time. So War Chest is asymmetric, and you're looking at the other player's moves. You've got to think about the probability of what you're going to draw from the bag based on what you're putting in. You can see what their little chips or discs that represent your units, and each player has 4 different ones. And you can see what they've discarded, and some of the discards are face up and some are face down. So you're trying to make predictions about, well, what is in that bag? Are they going to be able to move that piece if I move? So again, there's the logical problem solving and prediction, and planning. There's so much planning that goes into so many of these games. Like if you look at the games on my channel, so much that so many of the videos talk about executive functioning skills. And the executive functions are the skills that you need to be able to work towards a goal. So stopping yourself from doing the first thing that comes into your mind, planning ahead, tackling things in an organized way, budgeting and managing resources. Those are all examples of executive functioning skills, working memory, and attention. I mean, you can't think of very many more things that could be more important in a school setting than the executive functions. If you look at a disorder like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that's thought of, I think, now by more and more of the researchers as being a disorder of the executive functions rather than a disorder of attention. So games that allow you to practice and develop those skills, I think, are key. And I first made that connection through some resources that I picked up from Harvard Center on the Developing Child. And they have some really good articles about executive functions. And one of the things they recommend doing with kids is to play strategic board games with them. And they recommended chess and Go and backgammon and other kinds of, so they stretched out a little bit from chess, but still, I mean, the focus
on the older games.
Speaking of backgammon, he and I used to play backgammon when we were dating and early married. Like that's just, we played backgammon and Skippo, and what else did we play?
Phase 10.
Yeah, those type of things when we
Canasta.
were. Yeah. We played Canasta when we were, but I didn't, I would have horrible, any game we played, what is it called? AP. Analysis paralysis. I would, it was almost like so much was on the line, and I was anxious about what move I could do. And since we've been playing more games, I'm just like, sure, I'll try that one. Like, we'll just go. Like, I'm much more less of the like really deep thinking about my next move. It's like, well, I'm just going to play with what I think is like my very first thought. And it's been making me actually have quicker decisions making, like, cause I would even have to process things. I wasn't a fly by the seat of my pants type of It's really difficult for me to do that. But since playing games, even I'm more easier going. If plans change, I can process better the switch of schedules than I used to be. It's just random things that I've noticed about me just by playing more games, which I didn't like. That has to be something to do with the fact that we play so many games and things can switch like that. And I don't know.
Yeah, and you're playing so often. Like,
yeah,
I think it would be very hard to do research on a situation like that, because I can't think of too many other families who would say, "Oh, there's one night a week where we don't play." Most of the time, we're all playing together. So, I think when I first started playing these kinds of games with my kids at home, it was really my effort to get them away from the computer. Right? Because I'm a psychologist and I work with families and I deal with parents on parenting issues. I always in my office would say, you never tell them just turn that off and find something to do. You should always tell your kids, okay, it's time to turn that off. Come and do something with me. Well, let's do something together, so that you're the replacement for whatever it is they think that they're getting from that video game. And I thought that those kinds of strategic board games would be sort of almost a lateral transition from, okay, I'm playing this kind of a game now with my friends. Oh, now I'm playing with my dad, and sometimes my friends join in, but it's also a game, and it kind of tickles that same itch.
Yeah, we have our video game time is limited to weekend mornings, and like it's summer, so they're playing a little bit more during the week. But that's always
give it to, like, they don't get to ask to watch things, or else they don't get to. Like, it's one of those, like, that is a privilege, and we allow that.
But there's been a few wins where we'll get a new game on like a Friday, and Jared will be like, I'm not going to play video games. I'm going to learn how to do, because Jared loves solo games. So he's like, can I play this instead of video games tomorrow morning? And it's like, yes, you can. That's that
if you feel like you need to do that.
That's the ultimate. That is the ultimate.
Well, he'll still rules out of the games and take them upstairs to read the rule books.
I mean, that's a special kid right there.
Yes.
He wants to be an engineer. I'm sure there's some overlap.
He loves
in
knowing
there.
how everything works. So a new game, he wants to know how it works and why it works that way. That's just the way his brain works. My brain doesn't work that way at all. So I think that's fantastic because you're practicing the reading and all of that, and translating what you're reading into something that has real pieces and that is a real life sort of a thing, which is a great skill to be able to have. Not every kid is interested in doing that. I think, like, at my place, I'm the one who teaches the games to everyone. It doesn't matter. They're not watching Rodney Smith. They're not watching any of those other guys. They're not watching my videos even that explain how the game is played. But I explain the games to them. And I think that there's a benefit to that as well, because now with technology, there are only so many opportunities that parents have to be the giver of knowledge, to be the one who teaches, the one who's providing guidance to the kids, because they can, my goodness, they can just say to the speaker in their bedroom, tell me what this is and tell me how to do that. Like, how often, they never need to ask. That's true.
I can't think of the last time my kids asked me a factual question about unless we're in the car.
We're different because we've homeschooled their whole lives. Yeah. And so I can't, sometimes it's like in the car, I would be like, okay, for this whole car ride until we get home, no questions. Let mom have a just no question.
Can't Google and drive. So,
but because Jared, both of them are constantly asking me questions. You're like, you're asking me above my pay grade. I don't know how to answer this.
And sometimes, I do encourage the kids sometimes to research on their own, and partly that's because they see their dad as somebody who went to school for however many years to learn all the things that he knows, right? So I spent a lot of years in university, and they figure, oh well, he just knows a bunch of stuff. I could never learn that. I don't have that personality, or I don't have those skills, or I don't want to be a guy who spends 11 years in university. So why would I need to learn any of that kind of stuff? So they rely on me in that in one way, but I kind of try to help them to see, it's not like I just sat there for I got there by doing the work. If you do the work, you can do it.
So whether it's gaming or really any skill set, is there anything to that kind of managing multiple rule sets, multiple things, being able to access those? What's going on in the brain when they're, again, whether it's honestly, whether it's a video game or a board game, because you jump through video games with a bunch of different controls that you can just access. But
that's more muscle memory.
Obviously we're talking about board games, but if you take it out of board games to anything, what's going on in a kid's brain when they're just accessing these at will, just these different rule sets without having to read to access them. Recall it.
I mean, that what that is telling you is that they've somehow managed to transfer that information from their short-term memory to longer-term storage, right? But you have to be able to store that information in a way that's organized enough that you can access it again later. And if they're starting to do that, they're basically, I mean, they're studying by reading those rules, and then they're putting what they remember into practice. So there is, once you've played the game, there's I think psychologists would call it an autobiographical kind of a memory. You remember what you did, which is different from the other kinds of, like the memory that I measure in the assessments that I do for kids who, might be gifted or might have some learning problem. But so autobiographical memory is helpful, but being able to file away information that's important to you in a way that you can find it later on is also a great skill to be able to have. And obviously it's useful in a whole bunch of things, right? In your job. How many manuals and books you have to read to do your job, and you have to remember all of that information. Of course, you get better the more you do it. When you're doing something maybe that you get to repeat more than once. But I think that's a great skill to practice. One skill that I know just personally in my house that was helpful that developed through board games was that one of my kids, the younger guy, still Dexterity Games would be they're my favorite and they're his least favorite. And partly I think that's because his brother, who was more athletic, was like, he had a steady hand and he could, pull out a Jenga brick, no problem, and stack it on top, no problem. And the other guy was like a little more nervous and his hands would shake. His big brother would tease him. I don't know if that happens with your kids at home, but there's a lot of trash talk in the Dexterity Games that we play at our place. But the more we played those kinds of games, the more you can see that his hand, like usually now he can keep his hand steady. Usually now he can say, watch this trick shot in Crokinole, watch me do, whatever. We were playing Flicking Finches last week. And he was like knocking things off the board left and right. It was nice. Perfect. But he was the guy who could never do that and wasn't comfortable with it. He found it stressful, but he's now managed to get through that stress I think just through the practice, because it's a good kind of stress, really. There's nothing on the line, right? When it's a game instead of something that you're learning at school or, a project that you're going to be graded on. There's no consequences other than your brother might tease you. So it was up to me to sort of manage that part of it and make sure that things didn't get too stressful or out of hand. But it was a kind of stress that he learned how to deal with. And now in terms of having a steady hand, he could do those things. Now, does that mean he maybe also learned how to perform under pressure? I think that's he's learning to control his body. He's controlling his breathing. Psychologists would tell you those are things you need to do to manage stress, to reduce anxiety. You have to be able to control those things and be aware of your body and its position in space. And that's a good thing for adults to be able to do, right? Lots of adults are shaky when it comes to, Rhino Hero.
We've never really been good at the Dexterity Games. We play them, but none of us are really like pros at it. We're all pretty level in this.
Well, and that's a good thing too. It's sort of a level playing field between the parents and the kids. When I play games like Taco Cat, Goat Cheese Pizza with any teenager or younger child than that, I'm always the slowest. My reaction time is not as fast as it probably when I was 20 years old, I would have been great at those things, but
some of these quick thinking games, the kids are like really on top of it, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even see that. Okay, and like just keep they pick up on things faster than I do. I see the big picture more than they see the narrow stuff.
Yes, and we probably, as adults, there's better memory for patterns and more pattern recognition, and those, more later developing skills are much more developed. But just the speed for the kids is so. A game like Now Boarding is great because it's a cooperative game where you make your plan and then you execute the plan with a timer. So
So
you
we've
can
not played
take,
that one yet. We need to check that one
yeah,
out.
you
Now
can
boarding
take
us
your
an
time.
airplane game.
Yeah, it's where you're running an airline and you're trying to get, it's a pick up and deliver game where you're moving passengers to and fro
We like
by
pick up and delivers.
Fowers Games, the
Okay.
guys who made
well,
Burgle
check that
Bros,
out.
which is my favorite cooperative game is Burgle Bros. And Paperback is the most recent game that I play by them other than
I don't
now
think we've
boarding.
heard of
Yeah.
any of these.
See, there's just too many games.
Oh my
Like
God.
Oh, there's too many.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what,
It's the same
Paperback,
conversation we all have with everyone.
Paperback is a great one because it's a deck builder, but it's spelling words.
Oh, nice.
Oh, it's so good. And
Perked my ears.
you're buying better letter cards for your deck
Wait,
that have
you
little
had that on your
powers.
channel, right?
I did. Yes,
okay,
I did.
that's what I have seen
Yeah.
because I watched that one.
Oh my goodness.
The latest one that we had, the word building game, was a little wordy.
Yes.
The new one from Exploding Kittens.
Mhm.
They're yeah. So that's one we just started playing that last week, and I like that one. It's a little more advanced for Peyton just because he's still working on the spelling, and so like he would spell a word and
You'd spell it phonetically.
he would spell it phonetically, and so I would be guessing the spelling of the word and would get it wrong because it's not how he spelled it.
Yeah.
So that type of thing where it's, as long as I know that's what's going to be happening and I can guide him, versus it playing like competitively. With Jared, I'm totally playing competitively.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to win that game because he usually beats me and things like that, just getting all the berries. But
but Peyton learns from those mistakes too, right? Once
exactly.
I think that's an important part of the learning process as well. So I think a little wordy is a great game for that kind of stuff with the letters that you're shuffling, even knowing the difference between consonants and vowels, right?
Yes. There's not many word games that has that line between those letters. And then Jared was frustrated because Y isn't a vowel in that one. It's put in the consonant. He was like, but there's sometimes Y.
They should have made it both colors.
I know.
Put a Y in both bags.
Yeah. But that's something that's really cool about game schooling is that like I said, I've homeschooled their whole life. Since Jared went into first grade, I started homeschooling him, and we've used different curriculums, and I didn't focus on the games with the curriculum. Some of them came with it and we would play those randomly, but it wasn't like a set board game. And so adding games that we would just play wasn't a priority for me starting out, but the ones that we did play, he would always I had a fraction game with pi. It was an old game that I found at a Goodwill or Savers or something like that. And we played that, and he picked up that connected with him. He did not. I always struggled with fractions growing up. I didn't understand them, didn't like them. So I was like, I'm not gonna be able to teach these. Like, I don't, even as an adult, fully understand fractions to teach them. But that game, the concept of just the pi and the fractions and how it put those together made it click for him. Even as an adult, he understands fractions better than I do, and I taught him. And I really think it was because that game initially started it out, gave him this visual of what he was looking at, and that was his base of learning fractions. It just made it visually connect with him. And so now he picks up from fractions so quick, and I don't.
Yeah. And it makes it real, right? It makes it like it's a physical thing that you can imagine. When I think of fractions, I just think of those pictures in the textbook, right? Of circles that are divided up.
Right.
That's what I always think of.
Making them into decimals and that type of thing. It was all in that game that was old. I mean, that was like an 80s game, the way it was printed. And, but it helped him so much. And now he just does it like this. And it was the playing of the game with that. We were talking about how those rules kind of embed that into your brain and it categorizes it. I really think that because he did something with that knowledge right away, and put it to use by having an achievement with that knowledge, and that type of thing, versus just getting a grade and taking a quiz. It was different. It was in a game. He was actually enjoying himself, and it just did something. And so I'm really excited to learn about even more games that are going to help root those skills while they're learning them. I wish I had that when I was growing up and learning.
Same here. Yeah.
I mean, much easier.
You think about the logical problem solving that goes into creative problem solving, like with those escape room games. And the other thing, I wish we would have had I wish I would have had those things when I was a kid. I was always a kid, right? you know,
They have all these options.
and now they've got like so many games that you can't even keep track
I
of all the
know.
games that are coming out that do all of those things. Yeah.
Well, I love your channel and how you just take a game and you kind of categorize all the pieces of that game and how it helps with your cognitive thinking and how you're able to utilize those games for just your brain and what your brain is doing when you're playing those games. So I really appreciate about your channel and how you bring to light those games. So I was glad when Daniel was like, hey, we need to ask him the science behind this stuff. And I was like, yes, we do.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me on. It's certainly something, when my practice closed because of the pandemic and I couldn't see people anymore. I mean, I was a guy who was training for races and working on my business 6 days a week, and all of a sudden I could do nothing. And I couldn't go anywhere. Everything was shut down. So I thought, well, I love games. What's a unique thing that a psychologist could offer in the space that no one else really is doing? Now, your videos, though, with the board game basics, and I want to steal so many of your ideas, but you've already done them, so I won't steal your thunder for sure.
You have different audience than we do, definitely.
And that's a very similar story. I do video production, so everything shut down. We had a lot of clients that were doing, like, a lot of our spring work last year was corporate events. Those all got canceled, so that it was I've got cameras. How can I keep my skills sharp and just
our kids love to talk and we like to play games.
Yeah. So that was it was that same, they just developed out of that and became something that apparently resonated with people. And so that's our goal, is just to get more families playing games. We found so much just camaraderie in that, and just so much growth, even with, Peyton he can read. He's not, Jared will read him stories. So
Jared's been reading since he was 3.
Yeah.
So that was he picked that up and ran with it. Peyton,
it was a motivation issue as much as anything else. So playing games he's independent. So if he wanted to, like, he'd sit there and just study the card to figure out what it meant. And if he didn't have to ask you, he wasn't going to. Right. So it motivated him to read independently so that he could engage and play the games with us, which was a huge benefit. And
he's still slower with it, but it's helping a lot. We've noticed that it's helping a lot.
It's so interesting that you say that. There's a researcher at McGill University here in Canada who works on his work was focused on kids with reading disabilities. And he found that the way to get kids who have reading problems to read is to get them to read instructions for something that they want to do. There's a motivation there, and it's like, it translates into the real world. It's not totally abstract. So
it's not reading about what Bill did with his ball and answering questions about that. It has nothing to do with me. Why am I reading about this story that has nothing to do with me?
And that's another thing. Like, if you've got a game night where it's predictable, where it's scheduled, where it's something that the kids can count on. I think it's the same as family meals, or, the traditions around holidays. There's a study a few years back that showed that the number of things that families did as a tradition around a holiday was correlated with reduced risk of depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms. So it's that sense of belonging and that sense of stability and predictability. Exactly. I mean, what's more stressful than things being unpredictable and not knowing what's going to happen next or tomorrow?
Our life has been the last few years been really unpredictable because of my health and stuff. So having this last year of my health coming back and having that predictability, I've seen so much more joy in the boys and confidence just coming out of them, and knowing that that something is going to happen each day, or something to look forward to that they can actually count on. The unpredictability is definitely, you see it in adults being more depressive, but in kids, they're just not sad, but it's just this, like, I don't have an idea of I don't know.
Well, and they can get stuck. Stuck
is a really good way to say it. Just stuck.
Yeah. I think they can get stuck, because then that chronic kind of stress of not knowing what's going to happen next is something that really has a big impact on the emotional development that allows the cognitive development to occur.
And knowing that like through health struggles, even if we say this is going to happen, there's a chance that something out of our control is going to come in and make it not happen. And it's nobody's fault, but it's still, it's just that's been definitely something
learned
we've
flexibility.
Yeah.
The last few years.
Yeah,
they've got that down, but we need it the other way because
I mean they can be flexible if they have some things they can count on. It's a lot easier.
Exactly. And having it be our family time. We spend a lot of time outside as a family. So that is important. But just doing things as a family as a whole is something that we don't do a lot of. They don't do sports. And we've done soccer before, but they don't do all these different separate events, which I didn't growing up either, but we are so focused on building a team. We say that all the time. We're a team. We do this as a team. And that's something that we're building in this legacy of our family is family means team. Yeah. And that's why we like cooperative games.
There's no take that.
We're a team. We do.
Jared can get very take that winner.
Yeah, we can, especially he and I can get pretty take that. Jared, man, that kid. Have you played Brew yet? Were you able to get?
No, I didn't get my hands on a copy of Brew. I'm behind in my games.
It's such a cute, sweet game that looks like that. Man, that's a take that game. Yeah. And Jared. He like let me have it last time we were playing, and I was like, oh my gosh, and he was like, sorry. I'm just playing the game. And I was like, you're being mean.
Well, you know, if you work those things out in a game, then you don't have to work them out in real life. So
hey, there's one way to put it. Maybe I should push them to games more recently. They the video they just posted today was games they like playing together. And it was really fun watching them come up with that, because they really are the games that they'll pull off the shelf when I can't play with them. So.
I was watching that video today, actually, because I'm waiting to talk to these guys, and I saw that Kalami box, and I think that might be the noisiest game box of all time.
Oh my gosh, it was so funny. They did it so well. They set it up, and they were like, "Oh, we're just gonna keep going." I was so proud of them. Probably, are we kidding? Yeah. But yeah, that was a really loud. He goes afterwards. He was like, "We don't need to set this one upright anymore," and I was like, "No, that's not an upright game."
Well, it has been great talking to you. Can you just give a plug for your channel? Yes. Just tell our audience what your channel's about, where they can find you.
Sure. Well, the channel is called Brains on Games. You can also find the videos posted at brainsongames.ca, but Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed. It is a channel where I go through family weight games to kind of explain what they're all about, but I talk about the learning skills that are practiced by playing, because I'm a psychologist who does learning assessments for kids, and I give parents and teachers ideas about how to help kids make progress in any skills that might be lagging.
Awesome. I love it. I'm so glad that we've connected just in the past. I guess it's been past 5 months or so that I've been really following your stuff, and so I'm super excited, and I love your tips and tricks, and I hope that everyone is able to go over and check you out and subscribe to your channel, because it's definitely worth the time and watching. I love the knowledge that you share.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. This has been a ton of fun.
Yeah, it has. I love getting to know you.
Yep. So we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
So I hope that was a fun conversation for you to listen to. I know we both really enjoyed it. It's stuff that we've been able to observe, we see it happening, but it's fun to talk to someone who actually knows what they're talking about. So again, we will leave a link to Brian's channel. It's Brains on Games. We'll leave a link to that below, and go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you can see all of our future videos that come out.
We've got a couple over here that you can check out as well.
Yep. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you later. Bye.